What engine drives your story? Do you prefer the characters to be the driving force? Their actions and thoughts, their ups and downs, eclipsing the plot or pushing it into secondary position? Or is it the plot that pushes the narrative? The waves and troughs of plot threads cramming characters into their narrative webs. Today we talk about character-driven and plot-driven stories, their idioms, and where our panelists follow the subject. And this week, Joe brings you an indie film connection if you are a fan of Catherine O'Hara. Then we lay out the week ahead with our Go Indie Minute. We round up this week's narrative with excerpts from their work, read by our panelists in the epilogue. Now check your engine to see if it takes regular or unleaded, for it is time for another fantastic episode of This Week in Indies with your host, SM Hillman. Good frosty morning to you, and welcome to This Week in Indies for February 1st, 2026. I'm your host, SM Hillman. What's your preference, character or what? It's written down for me here, folks. I could just read it, but apparently that's too hard. Let's try that again. What's your preference, character or plot? As a reader and as a writer, the narrative cannot progress without both. Reading is hard. But which is the icing and which is the cake? Our panelists will discuss this today. So let's go ahead and meet them. Tony, introduce yourself to folks.
Hey, I am getting all sorts of weird feedback. So skip me and come back. I'm just trying to do my audio.
Will do.
Please.
Jessica, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Jessica Nettles. I'm the author of Children of Menlo Park and many stories in several anthologies. You can find me at jessicanettlesauthor.com and on social medias. And I'm excited to be here today to talk about character and plot and all of that. And hello.
Hello, thank you for being here. Ariel?
Hi, I'm Ariel Dawn. I'm a USA Today bestselling author, best known for my romances, my monster romances, Monsters of Ashwood and Bite Me, which is about a gingerbread shifter. The guy turns into a giant cookie. So obviously I love character-driven stuff. So that's me, and I pretty much write in all genres of romance. So, and I'm a huge avid reader as well. So that's me.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for being here. Tony, are we good?
I think so. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes, I am Tony Serecchia. I write generally character-driven stories, although there's, I think you kind of have to have a balance between the two of them. So my current piece is The Skin Man, which is out and available, and I guess right next to me here on the screen. And I think it's techno horror. So while it's going to hit the tropes that you expect, you're also going to like the characters.
Awesome, excellent. Thank you for being here. Let me get everybody back into their spot, well, the best we can. All right.
I'm over here, guys, just so you know that's over there.
All right. So, Tony, let's start with you. Character-driven, plot-driven. Do you have a preference as both a reader and as a writer?
So I think I generally will go for the character-driven stories. I think character is what brings us back over and over to the same stories. And I always point to Doctor Who as my example, right? In that we come back to Doctor Who because of the Doctor and his companions, not necessarily because of the clever plot story, the plot bits that occur.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely. Where do you feel like that developed over time? Was just as a reader, as a young reader, or?
Yeah, probably as a young reader. I just found it. I was more interested in the characters. I read. I think one of the earliest memories I have of reading was Encyclopedia Brown, and he had a very interesting relationship with his father, the sheriff. Like he always solved the cases before the sheriff did. So, and I like that. So I guess that was kind of my beginning of character.
Gotcha. Awesome.
And I'm sorry, I'm not mean to be, I'm just doing weird stuff because I keep hearing an echo in my headset now. So it's
That,
throwing me off.
no problem. No problem at all. Jessica?
I tend to prefer, unlike Tony, I tend to prefer character-driven stories. So I'm attracted to characters, whether it's like him, I'm drawn to the Doctor, not because of the storylines, although there's some really good storylines in Doctor Who, and there's good mythos. Still, you come back because the Doctor is so incredibly interesting. But I've always been drawn to characters. So things like I love Columbo. Why? Because I like Columbo. I like him as a character. He's engaging and interesting and unexpected, and I like unexpected characters that seem one way and then they've got all this undercarriage underneath where you're finding out things about them and they're not quite what they seem, and you've got to kind of watch them and continue to figure them out because there's more stuff, because people are that way. So yeah, I enjoy that, and I enjoy character driven stories much better than plot because of that, I think.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Uh, for you, is there, like Tony had mentioned, there was a character that sort of piqued that interest for you? Was there a particular character?
Oh gee. I mean, I was surrounded by lots of characters. So as a kid, so because I watched a lot of television and I read a lot, probably characters like Columbo, Spock. Fascinated by that character because once again, lots of layers. And even as a kid, I like characters with lots of layers and lots of, well, what about this? With reading, I was drawn to Nancy Drew, she doesn't seem like she has a lot of layers, but I guess I added them in my head. I don't know. But yeah, I can't really think of one specific character. Kolchak, yeah, I was exposed early to a lot of things. Characters that were curious and quirky always grabbed my interest, even as a kid. I like the weird characters.
Yeah, Kochek definitely checks that box, right?
Oh gosh, doesn't he though? But I love him because I kind of look at him and go, and even as a kid, I looked at him and went, yeah, that's probably going to be me eventually doing weird crap. And sure enough, I'm doing weird crap.
There we go. Awesome.
Yeah.
Ariel, what about you?
I think for me, honestly, it kind of depends on the book because I love character-driven stuff, and I probably lean towards that more than anything else. But there are times when I find myself writing, like recently when I was writing Mr. Pierce, which I knew was going to be more of a character-driven story. And as that story evolved, it became more heavy on the plot as I was writing it. So sometimes I think it just kind of depends where the story takes me, whether it's more character-driven or plot-driven. I have series like Ava Crowley, Vampire Slayer, and Hunter Games, which are very much connected. And they're very character driven, but they're also at this point, because we've had so many books in the series and I'm working on the 5th, for both series to align together, they're extremely plot driven too, because they connect. So I think it really does, for me, depend on what I'm writing. I write primarily romance, but I write a lot of like paranormal romance, monster romance, contemporary romance. I have a series that just came out last year called The Secret Games, which I co-write with Penny Fox, which is a male sports romance series, which is very much like in the vein of Heated Rivalry. And that is very, very plot driven as well, because all the books connect. But at the same time, they're very deep with the characters. And there's a lot going on there with that they're very character driven too. So I kind of feel like I'm kind of in the middle. And it really does depend on what I'm writing which way it leans.
Gotcha. Ask you the same question. Was there a particular character growing up or in your formative reading, writing years that stood out to you as really, really pushing the story or really pushing the narrative that brought you back to the stories?
Probably there's a couple. So I grew up. I was always an avid fan of like vampires and werewolves and things like that. I read a lot of R.L. Stein when I was younger, but I read more like the Fear Street books, which were like probably not what I should have been reading when I was younger because they were like a little bit above my grade. But I was always into reading all of that. And so for me, I think when I think of characters that were very formative to my writing, I think of Buffy. I think of Xena, and I think of Supernatural, because I was there for the pilot episode, not showing my age or anything. And I grew up with those, those franchises, and Lara Croft too, Tomb Raider. So those were all kind of characters I feel like that really kind of shaped the heroines that I write. And even to an extent, I would say, like even when I was reading when I was much younger, I was like the fifth grader that was reading Shakespeare. So a lot of my formative inspirations, I guess, are kind of clashed up the way my books are clashed up. I have a lot of more traditional type characters that I love, but then I also have the ones that subvert things too, like Buffy or Xena, or even Laura. So with that being said, I would say those are probably the ones that are most formative.
Real quick, I was curious with romance being, I don't know if it's fair to say romance is maybe the most idiom heavy genre, trope heavy genre, but it's pretty, but there are definitely established lines that romance generally needs to fall into. Do you find it hard to write characters that sort of stand out above that, or you feel like that's just a challenge of writing romance?
No, I think that's just a challenge of writing romance, and I think it's always funny, and I like to tell people this because people always go, "What are you talking about?" But before I started writing romance, I was an avid reviewer, so that's kind of how I fell into writing romance. Because at the time when I was reviewing romance, I was not the target audience for romance, and I was very much like, who writes books like this, right? Now I write those books. So life is stranger than fiction. So I always kind of go into it with that sometimes I feel like, sometimes a book is not for a person at that right time, but it may be for them later, or sometimes it might not be, for them at all. But other times I kind of try to remember when I'm writing my books, I'm always trying to appeal to the person that I was that like didn't necessarily read those books, and how would I appeal to that. So I kind of always bring that into my books, and I find especially as I was writing romance, I started writing all of these things, I started reading more of it, and I started discovering different authors and how they subverted that stuff or how they broke those stereotypes, right? I always kind of like to say that I'm a rule breaker because I don't like to follow the rules. It's just who I am. I'm a natural ADHD brat. So a lot of times I tend to mash things up. I tend to mix genres together, or I try to challenge myself by, okay, we have this as a trope. How do I flip it? Or how do I make it, how do I put my own spin on it? So I think for me, that's the fun and the challenge of writing romance is that, yes, there's tons of books out there that are very trope heavy, and they're great if you're looking for trope heavy stuff. But there's also tons of romances out there that subvert the tropes or push against it too. And so I love having that duality and being able to do that in my books as well.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. We have Jessica, who's breaking the fourth wall because JD is not here. Thank you, Jessica, for that. Good afternoon. AF Stewart. Hello, AF. Good to see you again. We have Cherry Alakai. Hello,
That's
y'all. Oh, that's you. Well, hello, you all.
That's me. It won't connect my Ariel for some reason, so I always have to go in as Cherry.
I should know that since I sent you an email. I was like, that looks familiar. But Xenia, yeah, everybody loves Xena. I was just thinking about Xena last night.
I love Xena.
And yes, y'all post questions or ask Sean. It's fun for you, sure. Always for me. Jessica, I'm going to throw this one to you. We'll get to plot here in a minute because we're a little bit focused on character, and we'll get to plot in just a moment. But when we talk about character, are we necessarily talking about the main protagonist or protagonist? Because I can think of, for instance, here, let me, because we're mentioning Stephen, I'm going to throw his picture up here. There we go. In the Stand, for instance, Stand, for instance, Randall Flagg is the most memorable character from the book, I think. A lot of even though I've read it so many times, I know all the main characters, but still is the one that stands out, right?
Well, I mean, there's Randall, and then there's Trash Can. There's always Trashy.
Trash
right?
Can Man, right. So does the character driving the story have to be the main protagonist, or should it be the main protagonist, or can
I don't think so.
the antagonist handle that duty?
I think it's all in what your goal is, right? As a writer, I think it can. I think there can be multiple characters. I mean, you have pieces. Well, The Stand is essentially, in my mind, it's an ensemble piece. Okay. And maybe that's why the main protagonist really isn't so memorable, although I really like him. I think it's an ensemble piece. There are lots of different voices and lots of different people doing different things. And you have the antagonist, Randall Flagg, who stands out above all for a good reason, because he's a character that ends up flowing into other books and being a bigger creature ultimately for King. I could talk about this for a long time. You've opened a can of worms. So no, I think that it's not just the main character that gets to drive the story. I think if you've got a good, strong protagonist, that protagonist can take the wheel and make crazy things happen too. Randall Flagg does that, and is a very strong and capable driver of a story, obviously, because he makes lots of things happen to the ensemble in The Stand for a good portion of the book, things that they don't even realize he's making happen, which makes it even more interesting, right? And he doesn't even have to be the main voice. Ultimately, especially when you're writing a novel, of course, you have to decide whose story is it. So even if it's not Randall Flagg's story necessarily in The Stand, in a way it sort of is. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense at all?
You're making sense. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So
Awesome.
yes, that's my answer.
Thank you, Jessica. Ariel, what about you? Does it always have to be the main protagonist, or can others, antagonists, side characters, drive stories too?
I think side characters can definitely drive stories too. I think it kind of really, for me, it depends, because a lot of times when I write stuff, I don't know sometimes that it's going to be a series, or I don't know that there's going to be more books until I get about halfway through them. A really good example of, I think, a side character that drives a story really well is Ava. From my Ava Crowley Vampire Slayer series. Before we got the Ava Crowley Vampire Slayer series, she was a side character in the Cards, which was my first book. And she really, even though the book is mostly focused on Ember and Derek, who are, star-crossed spirits that are basically repossessing people over a course of time. Even though the story is based on them, Ava is Ember's best friend, and she really does kind of like push Ember along, and she kind of like keeps things kind of going. And, she demanded her own story. So that was my second book, In the Blood. And through writing that, she demanded her own series. So I think sometimes that's just kind of the nature of those characters, those types of side characters that do help drive the story. Sometimes they're just main characters in disguise and they just need their own book. So sometimes I find that happens a lot. But I definitely think it really just does depend for me on the character. It depends on the story. There are a lot of, especially in romance, obviously, you want your main protagonist, obviously, to be, the main character of the story, and the love interest. But I do think there is something to be said for very powerful side characters too.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. Tony?
So I think I kind of thread the needle on this one. So if you don't have a powerful villain, it doesn't matter how your main character is. It becomes a boring story, I think. But I don't know necessarily that your villain needs to be a character per se. I was just I'm trying to think of. So I watched Chinatown the other night, and the villain in that, Noah Cross, definitely was a character though. Like a different villain would have made things happen differently. But if you look at Doctor Who Blink, the Weeping Angels, who are the villains in that, really don't have any character, right? They have one purpose, and they want to eat you and send you back in time. So again, we watch how the main character responds to that, and I think that's probably key in most stories. Is you need a main character to care about. You need to care about that person, and then the stronger the villain, the more you care about that person. Not necessarily does the villain have his own character. Although I always like a villain with character. I think Hannibal Lecter is an excellent example of a villain with character.
Yeah, absolutely. And does a great job of motivating others in various ways
Right.
to get what he wants, right? So
Yeah. Right.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Absolutely. All right. We have a few more comments here. When Strong gets his, there we go. So, A.F. Stewart, interesting side characters are how we get spin-off books. That is correct. Why doesn't Sauron have his own spin-off book, though? Well, I guess he does. Silmarillion. I guess it could be a spin-off.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yes, don't get me started. All my characters that demanded their own books. Well, that's one way to keep your career going, though, right? if you never run out of characters.
Right.
I have side characters that will make appearance in my second books and other places, just like in real life. Every person in your life has moments that are created around others. No, that's a good point. I think that sort of grounds the idea, right, of side characters or other characters driving the narrative. Because even though you're the protagonist of your life, there are plenty of people who drive bits of the plot as well.
We don't live in a vacuum.
No, right.
Right.
Or by others, right? Yep, for sure. And sometimes you just aren't the main character. That's true. Powerful villains are key. Yep. Sometimes side characters demand sequels too, for sure. And truth. Yep, absolutely. Okay, so we will take a short break to check on the indie film connection that Joe has brought us. If you're a fan of, rest in peace, Catherine O'Hara.
Hello, everybody. Joe Compton here, and welcome back to the Indie Film Connection. Today, I have 4 indie films that you will enjoy if you were a fan of Catherine O'Hara, as we celebrate her life and work here today. If I may just wax poetic for just a minute about Catherine. She was what you would call in Hollywood a classy dame. She was never afraid to show us a different side of her and go for it on screen. She had this silent, just malevolent command of the screen every time she was on it. And she never did it with this false bravado or loud, obnoxious gregariousness. She was always very subtle and very, very gentle when it came to the screen and giving us something amazing. it's those performances that we remember the most. And she is the most memorable in them. She is one of those that is going to be sadly missed. A generation that is waning and leaving us way too soon. So today we celebrate the life of Catherine O'Hara with just 4 films that I found exquisite within her catalog. They just happen to be independent films. So I'm happy to share them with you here today. The first indie film I have for you is called ACOD, or Adult Child of Divorce. It was a film by Stuart Zickerman. It stars Adam Scott as the mostly content and successful Carter, who decides to revisit a former counselor to make sense of his brother Trey's sudden wedding and his parents' extremely messy divorce. One of his parents happens to be Catherine O'Hara. When he realizes his life has been personified in a book about children of divorce written by his mediocre counselor, he decides to confront his family about their dysfunctional nature. You can watch this movie right now by clicking on the QR code below. The next indie film I have for you is called Temple Grandin, a film by Mick Jackson. Before enrolling in college, famed animal husbandry expert Temple Grandin, played by Claire Danes, visits a cattle ranch owned by her aunt Anne, played by Catherine O'Hara, and demonstrates a brilliance for all things mechanical. Once classes begin, the autistic Grandin rises to meet the intellectual challenges, though the social ones are a bit more difficult. Grandin triumphs over prejudice to become an innovator in the field of animal care and a lifelong advocate for humane slaughtering practices. You can watch this movie, Temple Grandin, on HBO Max by clicking on the QR code below. The next indie film I have for you is one of my all-time favorites. In fact, it is within my top 100 films of all time. It is a movie called Away We Go by Sam Mendes. As they wait the birth of their baby, a couple, John Krasinski and Maya Rudolph, travel across America in search of the perfect place to raise their family. During their journey, they share assorted misadventures and reconnect with old friends and relatives, one of which is Catherine O'Hara. The experiences and the people they encounter help them define the word home on their terms, possibly for the first time ever in their lives. You can watch Away We Go by clicking on the QR code below. And finally, the last film I have for you is part of a collection of great interpretation of improv and mockumentary filmmaking by Christopher Guest. This is the final film that they did together, him and Catherine O'Hara. It is for your consideration. The possibility of Oscar Gold holds the cast and crew of an independent film in its grip after the performances of its virtually unknown veteran star, Catherine O'Hara, generates award buzz. Though the movie in question, Home for Purim, is impossibly awful, the rumors of future nominations snowball and attract the attention of a distributor who wants to make a few minor changes. You can watch this film right now by clicking on the QR code below, and I highly recommend going and checking out the entire catalog of these virtuosos by starting with Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show, and then, of course, A Mighty Wind. That'll do it for us here at the Indie Film Connection. I'm Joe Compton. I'll see you next time. And rest in peace, Catherine O'Hara.
Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for putting up that there. All right. Okay. Ariel. Let's talk about plot for a minute. What does it take for a plot, in your opinion, to sort of elevate itself over the characters, and in a way that doesn't necessarily erase the characters, but really is memorable for the reader?
So I think in Mr. Pierce kind of went this way for me, and that's how it kind of ended up being more of a 50-50 with plot-driven versus character-driven. I started out writing the book where I was leaning very much more heavily on the main characters. their motivations, their desires, all the inner turmoil, that sort of thing. And as it started writing it and building those layers, the plot sort of started to come out a little bit more, where that it started to kind of go into a direction. Mr. Pierce is technically a age gap billionaire male romance, but it's got a little bit of like the Net in there. It's got a little bit of the Bourne Identity. It's got a little bit of Iron Man. So it's very much a mashup. But it started out one way and the plot started kind of thickening a little bit more, that we got in to like the computer stuff and the hacker stuff and things like that. So with that being said, I think it kind of, what elevates it is sometimes when you discover a little bit more about that character, and those background pieces start to become more evident. I feel like if they're staying background pieces, you're more or less going to kind of be in the character-driven era. But if those background pieces start to be a little bit more prominent, that's where it kind of elevates and becomes a little bit more of the plot-driven area. And that's where I think both can kind of infuse each other and work with each other to make that more memorable for the reader.
Awesome. Thank you. Tony?
So I think you need a balance of plot. I don't think plot should ever be above your character. I mean, plot moves your story forward, right? But the characters are what gives it weight. So you need a good plot for your characters. But generally, so when I start writing something, it's like, well, I have this character. Now, what horrible things can I do to them? And that becomes the plot, right? So none of my other characters, excuse me, none of the other characters that I've ever written would respond to this plot the same way as this character is going to do, right? So with the plot needs to challenge your character, but your character's who's going to respond to it. I mean, it's almost like a Gestalt or a Zen thing where it all interacts, right? Nothing should really be the superior option, I guess, right? I'm working on an audio drama mystery right now, a straight mystery, no ghosts, no goblins. So it's kind of a whole new experience for me. But there are things that I want to hit, right? We know the bad guys have done XYZ, but how the heroine responds to them is not the same way as her male counterpart would respond to them, right? So I think that is what's different. So you want to have the plot. I mean, if you look at Hallmark Christmas movies or Hallmark romances, right? They are pretty much a very narrow plot, but they've written hundreds of movies with this narrow plot because the characters interact differently with those plots. So I think that's kind of where you want to have that balance there.
All right, gotcha. Awesome. Thank you so much. Jessica?
I kind of agree with Tony because I start a lot with characters, and then I play a lot of what if. And sometimes I have a general story in mind when the characters arrive, when the characters are there. But then it's like, well, what are they going to do? If this happens? How are they going to respond? And like he said, each character responds differently. So a story that I might have my characters, Kate and Shadow, working in, it's not going to work for, say, the three witches characters that I have doing other things because they live in a different era and they do different things. They function differently and their relationships are different. So, yeah, I like that balance of plot and character, and plot really never really takes over because character informs the plot so much. Things aren't going to happen if a character decides to do something that they would do, if that makes sense. So really it's a balancing act. They work together.
So I just wanted to ask Jessica and Ariel. Tony described how he gets his plots by wanting to do terrible things to a character that he likes. Is that similar for both of you, or?
Oh yeah. It's what mine is always. Can what kind of problems can they get into? What kind of trouble can they get into? And how far can I push this problem? And how deep can we go without destroying somebody? Or do I want to destroy somebody? You know. So far, none of my main characters have been destroyed. Could that change? Maybe. Now they're all screaming in my head, no. But I mean, how far are you willing to go before you destroy the character, and what kind of growth can you expect from taking them that far? So, for instance, in my novel Kudzu Ridge, which is not out yet, I explored a lot of how far can I take this girl who is learning about her magic as she goes, while also facing giant monsters. How far can we go, and how crazy can it get before she really discovers who she can trust and who her friends are, and find her new family? And I don't know that I've really found the end of how far she can go yet, or how bad things can get, because right now she's in a car driving to Atlanta to see how much worse it is. We'll find out. So yeah, I mean, where do you hit bottom, and what do they discover about themselves? I think is always the question.
Gotcha.
I think to answer too, because I believe you asked me too,
Yes.
about like how the if I decide what I want to do to my characters, how hard I want to punish them, or how how mean I want to be to them. So it really kind of I do with a lot of things. I really like to have duality. I like to have my characters presenting one way, but internally it's completely different. That's one of my favorite things. And I love to play with like contrast. So I do a lot of stuff, especially with like my paranormal romances, my monster romances, things like that, with flipping the narrative, like who is the monster type thing, right? So that's really prevalent in the Ava Crowley series and the Hunter Games series. Where you have these slayers and the monster hunters versus, the monsters and things like that. So I think for me, more or less, it's not what can I do to the characters, it's how can I make them grow through it. But a lot of times my characters definitely deal with a lot of mental health issues. They deal with a lot of, repressed type stuff. They deal with a lot of being one way, or feeling like they need to kind of move out of that, or being kind of stuck. Ava's a really good example, because we follow her from the time she's 18 till she is very much an adult. So you see a lot of that growth through there, of how she feels towards hunting monsters, towards other people, towards her friends, and constantly challenging herself by being around the vampire who is obsessed with her. And how we kind of deal with those things. How does she deal with loss? How does she deal with when her friends are killed by monsters? Things like that. So a lot of times I like to not necessarily say like, what can I do, or what happens next, or how far can I push it? I like to try to think, how can we grow from it? And so I try to lay the seed as best I can, and try to really kind of try to build it out, which is a lot easier to do within a series, obviously, than within a standalone. But I will say the one I have coming out next month, which is Mr. Pierce, which is over there, we deal with a lot of the duality there too, where we have our main character, Oliver, who is kind of stuck in a very toxic relationship with a man who claims to be dominant, but he's not. He uses as an excuse to abuse his partner. And then we have somebody else who is claiming to be the opposite of that, and they are the opposite of that. They are nurturing, they are caring, and things like that. So I feel like a lot of times I like to think about how can we grow from it, as opposed to what can I do or how can I be mean.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you. Last question. We always sort of try to give some advice for the new writer, someone who might be getting into it or hasn't published yet. When you're balancing character and plot, and this is out to everyone, do you have like a checklist? Do you have a few things you keep in mind? What advice can we give to the new writer?
Read everything. Pay attention to what you're reading. See how folks you love to read do it. Also pay attention to the media that you are consuming. So even when I'm watching a movie, when I'm watching things like I just finished Wonder Man. By the way, Wonder Man's awesome. Y'all should watch it. I'm just saying. Very good character development. And I know some folks are saying, well, nothing happened. Actually, a lot happened. And a lot of character development happened, and a lot of character growth happened. So it's a good study in how do we grow characters and still have. It wasn't high action, so he wasn't going around beating up bad guys, but this character was growing and learning an awful lot. And by the way, Trevor rocks. So watch what the dialogue's doing, watch what action is doing, watch how people who write professionally do it. Find your favorite authors and watch what they're doing. I still do that. I still study other authors, people that I love, people who I'm friends with. I study what they're doing. I still study Mr. King because he still does a good thing. He still does that character plot balance pretty well. Yeah, hey Steve. Study the people that you love. You should be reading. If you are not reading, you're doing it wrong. I'm just going to say that. If you're not reading, you're doing it wrong.
So I'll jump in. I actually I work with kids who are trying to be authors. They're working on their books and things like that. And one of the things that I always tell them, and I tell just about everybody who wants to get into writing, find your favorite character. It can be from anything. Can be from a book. Can be from a movie. Can be from a show. Find your favorite character and break them down. Break them down like you would break like if you would write a review about it or whatever, if you were telling somebody else about that character, right? So one of the kids that I was working with is very much into Stranger Things right now. And I said, okay, who's your favorite character on Stranger Things? And they told me Mike. And I said, okay, break Mike down. Break him down into tropes, break him down into, what's his arc, break it down. And then you can kind of study individual characters, and you can kind of see how they affect other characters. You can see how they affect plot or how plot affects them. So I always do try to tell people, you don't have to look outward, just look at your favorite characters and break them down.
So I would agree with everything that went before. And I would also add that what works for us isn't going to work for you, or maybe it will. I don't know. Right. But nothing that any technique book or guru says is going to work 100% of the time for everyone. That being said, listen to ballads, listen to country music, and I'm not a big country music fan, but I do listen to it. And the economy of words and the balance of character and plot in a 3-minute song is amazing. And what songs do I listen to? Listen to the most popular ones. We are now well past Whamageddon, so go listen to The Last Christmas. And in the first, Last Christmas, in the first 16 words of that song or so, he gives you the plot, the inciting incident, and the character, right? So if they can do that in a 3-minute song, which I don't know how many words that is, maybe 300 words or so, right? Yeah, what can you do in 9,000 or excuse me 90,000 words, right? Look at that economy of words that professional songwriters do. It has been a huge help for me. Also, wait, one more thing. As an audio drama writer, I'm a big fan. Dialogue is where for me is where the story exists, and you'll also get that economy of words listening to music, to ballads, not necessarily love songs, but ballads or ballads that are love songs, I guess, if that's where you are. But you want to hear those story songs that do it all in 3.5 minutes or so.
Right. I would add, to jump on the dialogue thing.
Mhm.
It's all about show, don't tell. And I know that sounds weird because you're like, well, they're talking. When you add the story to the dialogue, that means that you are not info dumping.
Right.
It means that the characters are sharing information between themselves. And that means your story's moving. That means that they're chattering and they're moving.
And if I want to jump on what Jessica just said, trust your readers or your listeners or your audience to be smart, right?
Yes.
You don't have to I mean, I know there's the Netflix writing where they retell you the plot every 30 minutes or so. You don't have to do that in a book. You don't have to do that in your audio drama. People are paying attention. People are reading that. Don't keep cycling back. Trust that your reader is smart enough to read what's actually happening, and you don't need to do the big expo dumps.
And I just want to jump into, since y'all were talking about dialogue too, especially when writing dialogue, I try to read it back out loud so that I can hear how it sounds, because I think sometimes that can be something that is kind of overlooked, especially when you're just starting out writing.
Yeah.
Especially if you are more familiar with television shows and movies and things like that. I try to envision everything kind of like a movie in my head, and if I was explaining that movie to somebody else. So I will tend to read that dialogue back out loud just to make sure that it sounds like how two people would talk and not how I would think, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Also, don't be afraid to listen to people in the restaurant. Don't be afraid to eavesdrop. Some of the best dialogue and speaking rhythm you can pick up is by listening to people talk in real situations.
Yep.
You pick up banter, you pick up voice rhythm, all of it's there. And if you can get good at writing banter, especially in certain genres, you've got it made.
Yep.
I love banter.
Yeah, don't be afraid to liberate entire conversations.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, because there's some fun stuff out there that you can liberate and use for your material.
Yes.
Do not be afraid.
For sure. Absolutely. All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the great conversation. Hopefully that people will get something out of it. I know I did. For sure. Let's take a look at some of our comments. Best in shows perfection. Good now, Joe. Agree, A.F. Stewart. All hail Cookie Guggleman. Okay. Using Dungeons and Dragons character sheets can be useful for character breakdown or building sometimes. This is very true. Yeah. Absolutely. And Johnny Cash is king. There
we go. Yes.
The man in black. So there we go.
Yes.
I would also throw out, as someone who grew up listening to bluegrass, not always of my own choice, but bluegrass has a lot of the same characteristics. You can get a lot of stories in bluegrass that you can get a lot of.
Early Americana music.
Related.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so now it is time for our Go Indie. There's production things to do. Where is it? It's time for our Go Indie Minute. Yay, this week's shows. Yay. Okay, so all times will be Eastern, just so everyone knows. So let's start it off. Monday at, looks like 7 p.m. Eastern Time. 21 Grams. Season 6 is going great. There are a lot of great guests this year, folks. With Jotham Austin II, PhD. So check that out. Joe will have a conversation with Jotham, who I hope that's how I pronounce your name, Jotham. All right, so also on Monday we have Late Night News with Joe Compton and Vanessa Junta. Joe and Vanessa will be talking about indie news, and I'm actually going to be taping a segment for them. So it's like the real news, right? I have tape segments. There we go. Good times. Tuesday, and that'll be at 8. Excuse me, that's at 9 Eastern. So on Tuesday we have Indie Wrestling in 2026. It's on TV now. Working the Indies with Brian Tan and Joe Compton. Joe probably getting tired of me doing that. But no, absolutely. If you're a wrestling fan, even if you're not a wrestling fan, I think it's fascinating how indie wrestling is fascinating. It's on TV now, so check that out. All right, finally, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Yours truly I will have news releases and thoughts on indie gaming for Zero Means You're Dead. This month's interview is with game designer Sarah Manson. Sarah is also an author, and you will really enjoy that conversation. It's a great conversation. Sarah gives us everything that we asked for, and I think you enjoy it. That's Wednesday, February 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern. Remember, even though we have tape segments, the show itself will be live. So when I'm goofing up, you can't say, well, they should edit that out, because they're not able to edit that out. So, all right. And, yep, room's there, correct. Okay, so we're going to start with Tony. Tony, are you ready to read your...
I am.
It's the epilogue. Yes. So let me get you on screen, and let me get your hero tag, and please go ahead.
Okay, this is chapter 2 from The Skin Man, a techno horror novel that is out right now. This is one of our POV characters. So, chapter 2, Circuit Breaker, part 1, The Spark. Stephen always thought the apocalypse would be cooler. If it had to happen, he figured there'd be flare, a rogue AI meltdown, a super volcano, maybe laser-eyed dolphins rocketing from the melting ice caps. Instead, it began with a cough, wet and racking, echoing through the HVAC like a dying trombone. Then a scream, sharp, sudden, like a horror movie jump scare. It was 3:42 p.m. on Friday. Stephen, 6 feet of hoodie, sarcasm, and sleep debt, was hunched over a folding table on the 8th floor of Auburn Tower, a 12-story glass and concrete box just off Peachtree and 10th. His desk looked like the crash-landed Radio Shack, soldered wires, circuit boards, a near-dead Monster Zero, excuse me, and a battered Roomba chassis. If not for the photo of his wife and daughter clipped to the monitor, you might have guessed it belonged to a broke Tony Stark. At the center sat his pride and joy, a Raspberry Pi 4 with a cooling fan mod, labeled in Sharpie, GLaDOS Jr. Across from him sat Nolan, a marketing analyst with high fashion dreams and no visible responsibilities. He scrolled aimlessly through his phone, Red Bull in hand, his shirt both designer and offensively unbuttoned for a corporate setting. Stephen tapped a few keys. Behold, the future of surveillance, domestic assistance, and mild emotional trauma. The Roomba buzzed to life. It rolled forward, duct tape shell wobbling slightly, a GoPro mounted like a single judgmental eye. It scanned the room, beeped twice, and then locked on to Nolan. Hey, bro, it said in a flat voice. Nice shirt. Did you get dressed in the dark? Nolan choked. You programmed sarcasm? Stephen grinned. I didn't need to. I scraped Reddit for sarcasm, filtered it through Stack Overflow, and taught it to roast anyone with a trust fund. So you built a trolling vacuum. Yeah, I call it Snarkbot Prime. The lights flickered. Power surge, Nolan asked. Overhead, the fluorescents dimmed, buzzing like they were giving up. Then, beep, beep, beep. The fire alarm sounded. A crackling voice through the PA. All employees, please walk carefully to the nearest exits. The system cut with a pop. Another scream pierced the floor, raw and terrified. Then the sound of something heavy slamming into drywall. Stephen's phone buzzed. CDC alert. Shelter in place. Midtown Atlanta outbreak confirmed. Live, MARTA. Service suspended. All trains stopped at perimeter checkpoints. Breaking. Mass casualties reported at Emory Hospital. Group chat. Yo, anyone see Janice bite Phil in the stairwell? WTF. Stephen looked up slowly. I don't think this is a drill. And
Awesome.
that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. You can go ahead and get this game in. Click on that QR code for us. All right, Jessica, you ready?
As ready as I'm going to be.
Okay, give me 1 second, and there you go.
Okay, so what I'm reading is from my work in progress. This is chapter 1 from my new Caden Shadow novel, which is the sequel to Children of Menlo Park. It currently doesn't have a title. I am working to get this done this year, hopefully. I know a lot of folks are waiting for this, so yeah, I know you're angry at me, folks, but it's coming, I promise. Okay, so this is chapter 1. And let's see how we go. Chapter 1. Any signs of Miss Sauls? Shadow glanced up as he placed what looked like a hair or leaf into an envelope. Kate shook her head. It's odd. The first few hours after something this traumatic, most people don't want to leave their body. Shadow stood up and grinned. You went back to the office, as I recall. My only trauma was, she touched his shoulder, that my caseload was backed up. He took her hand and arched his eyebrow. I was handling things just fine. She was sure that she saw a twinkle in his eye. Humor wasn't always easy for her partner. Kate shook her head. Kate turned her attention to the girl on the ground. Are we even sure what killed her? It could just be a wild dog from the swamp. Shadow shook his head. Miss Sauls is the 4th girl killed this way in as many weeks, and you and I both know Don wouldn't send a telegram if he thought this was just a swamp dog. Kate couldn't argue with the logic. Shadow knew Don better than he knew her. They'd worked together even before the war, and the man determined himself her protector as soon as he met her near the close of the war. Normally, that sort of attitude was irritating, but his manner of protection was more charming than annoying most of the time. She patted the knife she kept at her side at all times now. She still wasn't exactly sure how he made the blade sharp enough to cut beings of eldritch power, but she was glad to own it. Wild dogs wouldn't be this particular about who they attack either, Kate said as they knelt by the girl and took her hand. Did you see this? Shadow knelt down beside her. The ring? Many women wear rings. It's rather ornate. Maybe she's engaged to be married. Shadow removed the ring. That is something that women do. Kate nudged him. Are you making a joke? He stared at the ring. At a time like this, over a dead woman? She started laughing. You are, and at my expense. What is the world coming to? She gazed at the ring in his fingers. Since you now have theories about marriage, does this look like an engagement ring, kind sir? He held it out between them and then glanced over at Kate. Perhaps if a wolf proposed. Is that the only reason she'd wear a wolf head ring? He dropped his eyes. No, but it was a thought. You can do better. She smiled and took the ring from Shadow and tucked it in the pouch next to her knife. Then she turned her attention to the girl's arms. It looks like she fought whatever attacked her. Shadow moved to the other side of the body and found something on the ground. Someone was armed. He cradled a pearl-handled derringer in his gloved hands. Good taste, Remington, Kate said. Was it fired? Her partner opened it. A bullet gleamed in the moonlight. One silver bullet here, so no. He clicked the barrel back into place. But why would Miss Sauls be armed this way late at night near a graveyard? In fact, why would she be out so late at all?
Thank you so much. That was awesome and a good tease for the sequel. That is yet unnamed. Thank you, Jessica. All right, Ariel, are you ready?
Yep. I'm going to read an excerpt from Mr. Stone, which comes out next month, February 7th. Well, we're in February now, so I guess it is the next month. So on the 17th, in 16 days. So I'm going to read an excerpt from that. It is a male billionaire age gap romance with a little bit of hacker involved. So here we go. So, okay. Oliver taps away on his computer as I let out a heavy breath. Chickadee purses her lips. What do you mean you don't know? I bite at Erickson. He's young, like Oliver, but he's smart as a whip, usually. But today he is trying my patience. Or perhaps I am the one who is out of sorts. Again. The code is conflicting, Erickson says, with a huff as Maria and Bill, the other two leads on Project Phantom, stare at me in concern. I don't see how. I cross my arms. You three are the best engineers I have on my team. Are you seriously telling me that you cannot isolate the cause of the malfunction in not one, not two, but 7 prototypes? Yes, Erickson says skittishly. For fuck's sakes, what the hell am I paying you for then? I snap. Sloan, Chickadee groans. Take it easy. Let the man explain. There is nothing to explain. I shake my head. Oliver stops typing. I catch his gaze out of my peripheral vision. They had one job, Chickadee. One. Isolate the source code for the malfunction. They've had months. And yet here we are. It would help if I had the original source for the code, Erickson says, and I bow my head in frustration. The original source code. Robert's modified code, which he took with him when I fired him on account of his breach of contract and threat to Vale. At the time, I did not care. I was committed to Vale. Robert was not responsible for my vision or my product. I was. But the truth remained, haunting me every day since he left with that damn algorithm of mine he'd tweaked. And every day Phantom is delayed, I chastise myself for not seizing that algorithm as property of Vale. There's no taking it back now, even if I wanted to. At this point, it's his word against mine. And even if I could somehow get my hands on that code, there's no telling if it would be the same one responsible for creating the glitch. Knowing Robert, he's slipped me a Trojan horse and backslash his way into my entire operation. He's conniving like that. Topping from the bottom is Robert Stratford's signature. That's not happening, Erickson. You know that. I focus my attention on Maria. Can't you back engineer the source code? Maria's eyes widen. Mr. Pierce, that could take months. What have you been doing all this time? Sucking your damn thumbs? I mutter. Sloan! Chickadee stands, her voice echoing like a bell. That is enough. You know these three have been working their asses off in here every day for the last 6 months for you. And yet we still have no sign of progress, I growl. We are no closer to stabilizing Phantom. I need answers, not hypotheses and half-baked guesses. I look up, noting Oliver has his hand raised. So there we go.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that'll be out on the 17th. Is that right?
Yes.
Excellent. Cool. All right. I want to thank everyone, all my panelists, for being here. You were great, as always, and I appreciate you and your thoughts on the subject at hand. I want to thank everyone who commented. A.O. Mingle showing up near the end. A.O., good to see you again. And if you're listening to this in the future, please feel free to comment. We'd love to respond to comments and read them as well. And just remember, we have a whole slate of shows coming up this week. This week in Indies here on the Go Indie Now Network. And I think that's where we'll wrap up for today. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. Ariel, go ahead and tell folks where they can find you on the interwebs.
You can find me just about anywhere you find books. You can check me out at www.ariel.dawn.com with the dash in there. All my socials are listed. I am everywhere under the sun. I'm also on Kickstarter. I have 2 Kickstarters going right now. One of them is this month for a limited edition. So pretty much anywhere you find your books, I am there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being here today.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica?
You can find me, excuse me, you can find me at jessicanettlesauthor.com. You can find me on the Facebook and on the Instagram. You can find me as Steampunk English, where you'll see my cats, my crochet, and other pictures of things that I'm interested in looking at the moment. So follow my craziness.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. And Tony.
So I have a fairly frequent blog at tonyserecchia.com. I'm also Tony the Scribe on all the socials, so that's where you can find me.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you all. All right, everyone, join us next Sunday with another episode of This Week in Indies, where I believe Akshay will be one of the panelists and Joe will be hosting. So we will see you next week, because it's always a good time to go indie now. Have a good Sunday, folks.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.